Hello, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to Power to Coach, the second webinar in our Power Hour series, which is a suite of bite-sized sessions looking at leadership topics which are critical to the way we work today. And these will also cover communications and digital readiness and resilience. Happy International Women's Day. We hope it's going well for everybody, wherever you are. My name is Claire Luby. I'm Marketing Manager at Irish Times Training, and I'm delighted to be your host. Today, over the next hour or so, the next 45 minutes, we'll delve into the business critical area of coaching, which plays an integral part in our work environment, our personal relationships, and our daily lives. We did a bit of homework for this session. A recent L&D Global Sentiment Survey for Workplace Trends in 2023 showed that coaching and mentoring is in the top 10 hot topics of business conversation. And in Ireland, it's in the top 3. So with that in mind, today's session will look at frameworks, tools, and techniques to ensure that you and your team can perform to the highest level. Today, I'm delighted that we're joined by our expert thought leader in this space, Gerry Prizeman. Gerry is an executive coach with Irish Times Training, having previously been a career banker with Bank of Ireland. He's a member of our fantastic faculty, and you might have noticed his faculty videos on social media, so check him out. He works with us on the design and delivery of leadership and development and soft skill programs, which soft skills are now becoming power skills, which is what the series is all about. Before I hand over to Gerry, just some housekeeping. This session is being recorded. We'll have some time at the end of the session for Q&A, so do put your questions into the chat function and we'll be able to hopefully get to them at the end. If you have any queries at all about anything, just give us a shout. Obviously, the chat function is there for that, and we'd love to hear from you. So all going well, I'll hand over to Gerry now, and I'll see you later.
Thanks very much, Claire. Good afternoon, everybody, and you're very welcome. I hope your International Women's Day is going well so far, and thank you for taking the time to join us. So we're going to look at Power to Coach over the next 55 minutes or so. We will get you away on schedule at 2 o'clock. I want to give you a little bit of a flavour of what we cover on our 2-day coaching programme. And if you bear with me, I'll walk through a short presentation with you, probably about 25 minutes or so, and then we will take some Q&As at the end of that. I'm also just getting some issues with my video link, so just bear with me, and I hope you can still hear me okay on sound. So let's take it from the top and talk you through what's involved in this whole concept of coaching. And I want to go straight into giving you some definitions around what is coaching and what are the practitioners and the experts saying that it is. And I've chosen 4 individuals who are significant practitioners in the space. They've written a lot of books in the whole area, and they are deemed to be long-term experts. John Whitmore is seen as the godfather of coaching to some degree, and in the 70s really started the modern coaching structure that we currently recognize today. And his definition, coaching is unlocking people's potential to maximize their own performance. And I want to come down from there to diagonally look at Jenny Rogers, who says that coaching is about closing the gap between what people are capable of doing and what they're currently doing. And I really like both of those. And I think language is really important in coaching. You'll hear me talk about language as we go through this webinar. And the words in here like unlocking potential, closing the gap between what we're capable of doing and what we're currently doing, really gives a sense of what we're trying to do with coaching to enable people to reach and maximize at the highest possible outcome that they're capable of getting to. The other 2, Graham Lee and Catherine Sandler, are more in the leadership coaching space. And Lee talks about leadership coaching, encouraging managers to challenge self-limiting mindsets and to stretch for possibilities that might previously have seemed out of reach. Again, another nice definition. And this idea of self-limiting mindsets that we all bump into at different stages in our career where we tell ourselves that perhaps we can't do it. And coaching is designed to help people get through that structure and beyond that, to realize and recognize that with support that they can get there. Catherine Sandler, the aim of leadership coaching is to help managers improve their performance for the benefit of their organizations and themselves. And again, there's the duality, I think, within any well-organized coaching structure. Not only is it about supporting individuals to be as good as they can be, but if we are achieving that, we are by definition supporting the organization with colleagues who are more impactful than they might previously have been. So why do people coach? Why do organizations sign up to become coaching organizations? And the growth of coaching in organizations reflects our ever-strengthening belief in its potential to do a number of things. Optimize individual and organizational performance. And there's the duality piece again. I mean, any organization engaging in coaching is doing so because it wants to help its own people, help them to be, as I say, as good as they can be. But clearly that has an upside for the organization as well. And of course, through coaching, we can create a human capital advantage over competitors. Now, in today's environment and in today's marketplace where the war for talent is constant, anything you can do within your organization to provide an advantage over your competitors in terms of the way you develop your people is going to make a difference to you. Can we create open dialogue, reduce defensiveness, and allow individuals and organizations to learn, grow, and perform, which is, again, exactly what we're trying to do through the facilitation of personal development and confidence building. So I think already you're seeing, I hope, the symbiosis between helping individuals at a personal level and how that translates across to a positive outcome for the organization. And we can enable an innovative thinking within organizations through coaching because we are asking people to think for themselves. We are asking them to work out what options are open to them and how they might go forward. It can help organizations with challenges around sustainability, value creation, and competition. All three of these challenges are significant in today's environment as we move into the 2020s, particularly around sustainability and what's happening now. And value creation and competition has always been a driving challenge within all organizations. And how do we create fertile ground for growing new ideas and action plans? Coaching can help us in all of these areas. But why and how do leaders coach? So if you're sitting there as a leader manager of a team wondering, how do I go about this? Well, let's look at the outside right comment here in the box. Leaders can coach informal or informal sessions. I'm a great believer in the capacity for informal coaching between leaders, managers, and their teams. It doesn't always have to be pre-programmed. It doesn't always have to be in diaries. We can coach over a 10-minute coffee conversation. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And to the left of that, I think it's fair to say that coaching is now being deployed as part of an effective and increasingly popular management style. Many leaders in management are building coaching and a coaching capability into the way they want to manage their teams and their people. There is a positive correlation between coaching, employee satisfaction, and performance. And in the next slide, I just want to look at the facets of employee satisfaction that we think of when we think of that concept. And I'll talk about how coaching can support those. And of course, there are many reported benefits for managers and employees and their organizations through delivering and developing a coaching structure. So let's remind ourselves when we talk about employee engagement, what are the characteristics we're talking about? And again, if I read from right to left here, the things that matter to people when they say how they want to be treated within their organizations and whether employee engagement is where it needs to be, is they want to feel they're having an opportunity to be heard. Well, coaching, of course, provides a fantastic opportunity for colleagues to be heard. They want to be supported to be as good as they can be. And that's really an underpinning element to all coaching that I am trying to work with you as your line manager or as your leader in supporting you to be as good as you can be through a coaching approach. Are you respected and appreciated within your organization? Time and again, employees will say this is an important aspect of employee engagement. Well, the more we're coaching with people, the more we are showing that we respect and appreciate them. We respect their views, we respect their inputs, and we tend to be more in ask mode than tell mode. Feedback is sitting in there, and I'm going to talk about feedback and coaching a little bit later on, but coaching can definitely be used as part of a feedback structure. And of course, the whole L&D environment and being a member of a team, again, very much part of a coaching approach to how we go about the job day to day. And in that regard, let's look at what's involved in developing an organizational coaching culture. At the start, and if I go with the circle on the right, coaching needs to be encouraged and supported within the organization if we want to get it off the ground and make it part of our organizational culture. We need some format for training our internal coaches. We need some idea about how we want to help our leaders and managers become coaches. We need to build that into the systems perspective of the organization. So as we look at the organization, we are considering how do we bring our managers through to become better in the coaching space. The effort that's going into that needs to be recognized and rewarded. And we need to see coaching being an element of how we drive the business. Effectively, one of our business drivers is our approach to and our commitment to coaching. And of course, what's happening with our coaching approach needs to be managed and overseen. And of course, that gives rise to the bullet points on the left. We need sponsorship from top leadership. For an organization to deliver on an organizational change or shift to become an organization that's more committed to a coaching culture needs sponsorship from the top. And that means that the top leadership, of course, have to be seen to walk the talk in the context of the coaching space. It needs alignment with other key organizational people initiatives, which makes it part of our L&D strategy. And we should recognize coaching as a core skill set. Now, that's at organizational level. And you might be sitting there feeling, well, actually, I'm not sure my organization is that committed, but can I do something at personal level? And my response to that question is yes, you can. Obviously, it's excellent if the organization is trying to move into a coaching culture or is there already. But I think at individual level, within your own team, whether that's a team of 3 or a team of 23, you can make a decision about wanting to adopt a more coaching approach or a more coaching style with how you're engaging with that team. And a starting point on that can be something as simple as trying to move the current structure that may be built around annual feedback sessions, performance reviews, half-yearly, quarterly, whatever it might be. And I'm not saying they have to go out the window, but I am saying that perhaps as well as those, we might overlay some approach that involves ongoing conversations. And of course, that needs a commitment on your behalf. I don't want to underplay what's involved in any individual manager or leader deciding to go down this route. You do need to be committed to it. It does take effort. It does take time. But I believe it can give you a huge dividend in the outcome that you're getting from your teams if you are trying at individual level, irrespective of what the organization might be doing, to move your team into an ongoing conversation space as part of a coaching approach. So in that regard, let's look at you as leader, as coach. And I've just taken a couple of quotes here from the Handbook of Coaching Psychology from a number of years ago, where we're saying that it's ideally designed to assist the development of a culture where employees are supported to learn for themselves within a framework of guidance, facilitation, and well-intentioned feedback. Now, there's a lot in that sentence, but I think there's a lot in it that's really, really relevant. So the framework of guidance allows for two-way participation. It allows for me not directing you, but me trying to work with you to find solutions that perhaps you are authoring yourself. And that's really part of the facilitation process as well. And of course, feedback is such an integral part of today's business environment and how we deliver it. And if it's well-intentioned, of course, and needs to be, how it lands with the person receiving it and how we can make that a more meaningful engagement as part of a coaching structure. And as I said, we'll have a quick look at that later. And of course, all of this is very distinct and different from the more traditional command and control culture. And I mean, I grew up in a command and control culture in organizations in the 80s and 90s. And they have their place, they had their place. And again, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, because again, I'm sometimes asked the question, are you saying I can no longer, as a leader or a manager, be in tell mode around any element of what I do? And my answer to that is no. There are always times when, as a leader or as a manager, you will have to make decisions. You will have to provide direction. You will have to provide order. And that may well mean we are in tell mode for a particular element of the outcome that we are looking for. Like, for instance, if there's a crisis in an organization, if something has raised its head that needs to be dealt with incredibly quickly, if there's something that may give rise to reputational damage, that may mean that leaders and managers have to cut through and give direction about what needs to happen next. So again, I'm always keen to make sure that nobody walks away with the impression that I'm suggesting that you have to do away with tell. It has its place, but it's about understanding when it needs to happen as opposed to deploying it on a constant basis. And of course, an approach through coaching is much more befitting now of the current workplace demography, which is effectively principally made up of millennials and Gen Z. You know, anybody ranging in age from sort of 20 to 40. And they haven't been brought up in a command and control culture in the Ireland of from the mid-90s on, and perhaps even earlier. So again, doesn't it make sense that if people are culturally attuned to thinking for themselves and being asked for their views in the way they live their lives outside of work, that we should try and replicate that within the workplace environment as well? And I like the last two comments, that the approach is integral to building a learning organization by developing individual self-confidence and helping them value their own decision-making capability. I mean, how gratifying it is, or it has to be, as a manager or a leader, if you're able to say at the end of a period that you have been working with and helping your team and the individuals within it to become more self-confident and to have more confidence in their own decision-making capability. But of course, that means that coaching becomes an approach to performance enhancement, as opposed to emphasizing the leader's role emphasizing the leader's role as a developer rather than as a controller. And this approach will obviously encourage your colleagues within your team to develop those self-confidence and skills that we've just talked about, and to believe in that value of their own decision-making capability. But that doesn't happen overnight. And as I said, it takes time, it takes commitment, and it takes effort from you. And I think as the line manager, something that you need to need to recognize within this space is that trying to behave as both line manager and coach brings certain nuances with it. And those nuances are, as on the slide right now, can you promise confidentiality? I mean, clearly, if you're in a coaching environment and you're behaving as a coach with your team, you have to respect the confidentiality of what happens with those conversations. Of course, another great question for managers and leaders to ask themselves is, are you part of the problem? And, you know, this involves us all looking at ourselves as team leaders, managers of teams. Am I in any way contributing to any of the issues that my team may be having? And there are many ways in which the answer to that might be yes. Can you encourage or expect complete disclosure from the individual members of your team that you're trying to coach? And can you be entirely objective? That last one is an interesting one as well. We all bring with us the baggage of experience, good and bad. So, you know, we've been working within a team environment together for a while. You know, I have my view about you, and that may be positive or it may not be so positive. Can I park that and be objective as I try and work through a coaching approach with you as we go forward? These are questions that managers and leaders need to ask of themselves before they head down the coaching road. And what are some of the skill sets that you may want to see have you got currently in your bag, or can you develop? And I've just broken them down into two elements, interpersonal and cognitive. And on the interpersonal side, some of the obvious ones that you'd expect, you know, empathy, support, encouragement, reassurance, and a concern for people and their development. I think if you are going into coaching with your team and you can't bring some of those interpersonal skills with you, or you don't have a desire to bring them with you, or you don't believe that they're required, you do need to question whether you have the commitment then to support a coaching approach. But the good news is all of those skills can be developed. And some people have them in greater levels than others, but we can develop them. Some of these drop into the emotional intelligence space. And the good news around emotional intelligence, as we know, is that every day is a school day. So there's no element where you would sit back and say, I can't develop some of these interpersonal skills to a higher level than I currently have. On the cognitive side, can you broaden the perspective of the people on your team? Can you help them develop reflective thinking? And can you delegate? And what is your own level of delegation capability? And of course, broadening people's perspectives and helping their reflective thinking is a core aspect of what you're trying to achieve by taking a coaching approach with them. You're trying to help those things happen through the approach that you're taking as a coach. And that involves challenging people. It's the first time I've mentioned the word, I think today. A key element of coaching, particularly within your team environment, is that you bring challenge to the process. And again, we'll touch on that later. And of course, as you can see in the bubbles on the left, there's a requirement for skilled communication. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody has to be a top-class communicator. I think it does mean that you need to think about the language you're going to use, because as I said at the outset, language is important. You need to think about the approach that you want to take, and you need to think about, can you bring the necessary degrees of support and encouragement to the process. So staying with you in your coaching capacity, let's have a quick look at some of the things that we believe are important that you can actually deliver on. You need to be able to care about the people as well as the results. I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but it's also very true. I mean, in all organizations as leaders and managers, there is a pressure point on you to deliver against your results and against your targets. That's a fact of life. You need to understand, obviously, and try and bring to the coaching approach that while you're looking for your team to deliver on those results, they need to recognize and hopefully see that you are bringing a genuine care for them to the process as well. Some of the other ones I really like there is a coaching is about prompting the coachee to think out loud and to let the coachee eavesdrop on their own thinking. I think that's a wonderful expression. Sometimes when you're in a coaching conversation with somebody, they may be articulating out loud for the first time something that has been on their mind or in their head for some time. And it's only then when it gets articulated out loud to you on the other side of the conversation that somebody may hear themselves saying it for the first time. And it starts perhaps to give rise to the coaching conversation that may allow them to move beyond whatever the challenge is. And that's allowing the coachee to be aware of their own thinking process in the bottom left-hand corner there. You're looking to try and help a coachee to maintain mobility towards their desired outcomes. So again, you're trying to help somebody move the needle or move the dial. We're sitting with somebody at a point in time. We've identified a challenge. We've identified where they're trying to get to. One of the things you're trying to do is work with them as a coach as to how they might do that. And we look at the GROW model from Whitmore a little bit later before we wrap up, which gives you a model to approach that in terms of a structure. The underlined one there is not underlined by mistake, which is not to give advice or counsel. The day you hear yourself saying, if I were you in a coaching capacity, is the day you've stopped coaching. And we've got to avoid going down the if I were you route, because what we're trying to do at the end of the day is have somebody supported to develop their own thinking and consider their own options and try and arrive at their own outcomes. Because of course, when I say to you, if I were you, I've stopped coaching and I've started directing you. And of course, the problem with if I were you is, if I leave the conversation with that output from you and I try and do what you've suggested to me and it doesn't work, well then clearly the next outcome is your problem, not mine, because I did what you told me to do and it didn't work. Now, again, to be clear, I'm not saying there's never a time in your life or your career again as a leader or a manager where you won't say, if I were you. There's always a time. What I am saying is, if you are in a coaching engagement or you're trying to develop your coaching approach, if you find yourself saying, if I were you, you need to park it. And of course, other things we're trying to do is have the coachee accept responsibility for solving the problem. and not shifted onto you as the coach. Okay, another question that often comes through is tied into this particular statement. As a leader, you have an expectation of performance from your team, and you'll rightly hold your team accountable for results. I think that's a non-negotiable. You know, as a line manager or a leader of a team, there is an expectation that you and that team will achieve the results that you are accountable for. And you have a right to hold your team to that. But the question that sometimes gets asked arising from that statement, if we accept that that's valid, well, can I be both leader and coach simultaneously then? And I would say to you, the answer to that is a categorical yes. These are not mutually incompatible activities. You can be both, but there are things we need to be conscious of in trying to be both. You know, you can coach your team members to help them improve the skills needed to achieve the expected results. And that's really what we've been talking about. But you need to be clear about which role you're assuming at any given time. So again, back to the tell v ask. If I'm feeling the need to be in tell mode over something that's arisen, I shouldn't be trying to present that as being something different. It's the second last box there from the right, that we don't try to attempt to dress up, for instance, a performance management agenda in a coaching veneer. If I am performance managing you in a way where I'm being directive, that's not coaching, but it's perfectly valid that that's where I may need to be. But you need to use the opportunity to help your team develop and grow in confidence by coaching when appropriate. And of course, another really important piece of coaching as appropriate is that you don't feel the need to solve every challenge. And that's another thing I think worth asking ourselves, because from our own self-esteem perspective, as leaders and as team leaders, as managers of people, you very often want to be the person, and you sometimes feel the need to be the person who's providing the responses and the answers and the solutions. And we're only human. It's good for us. It's good to feel that this couldn't have been sorted without me. But you do need to recognize, if you're trying to move to more of a coaching culture, you've got to stop being the person who's finding the solution to everything or feeling that you have to do that. Part of coaching is helping your team to get to those points on their own. And in fact, in doing so, perhaps making yourself semi-redundant in certain elements of the way you'd been previously managing your colleagues. And that's okay. And I think the last comment on the right is really worth remembering. If trust breaks down in the coaching process between you and the coachee, it's very, very hard to get it back. And you can't really coach if trust is gone. I just want to look now at sort of coaching language as we move to sort of wrap up. And how, because I mentioned language a few times being important. So good coaching conversations involve compassion, curiosity, and commitment. And I just want to home in on the curiosity one, because curiosity is an underpinning element to all good coaching. And curiosity, of course, is about listening and asking good questions as opposed to talking, and ideally helping your coachee to unlock the answers. And when we come from a place of curiosity, as opposed to a place of judgment or attachment to our own point of view, new insights can appear. I think that's a really important element of recognition about coaching, because we all bring our own judgments, and I mentioned this earlier. We all bring attachment to our own point of view. It's perfectly normal and natural. But if you're trying to coach with your team, you may need to set aside, you will need to set aside some of your own prior judgments, and you will need to dilute your attachment to your own point of view and be prepared to take on board elements and inputs from elsewhere. And that's where the new insights can appear. That's where the richness can sometimes come to the fore. But questions that typically invite curiosity, if you were able to master these behaviors, how would this help you? What did you do well? What strengths did you use to achieve that? What a great question. What did you do well? I mean, by way of even giving somebody feedback in a coaching conversation, we've identified something that's gone well, which is a good place to be in the first place. And then you're actually asking the individual to articulate why it is that it went well. You know, what worked well, what strengths do they use? And that's allowing them to recognize that they've arrived at an outcome that they may want to deploy again, because it helped them to get the result that we're looking for. Okay, I'm just going to slow down on my video there again. I think it's just acting up slightly if I can, so just bear with me. Okay. So other questions at the heart that are at the heart of good coaching and are most effective. The good coaching questions are most effective when they're short, when they're direct, when they don't include I. So that's a little bit like the if I were you piece. The more you're putting I into the process, the more you're inserting yourself into the process, which is not where you want to be. They need to be challenging. They need to raise self-awareness. And they tend to be the what, how, who questions. Now, you'll note I don't have why there. And why is something of a pejorative word in the English language. Because what do you hear when you hear why? We tend to hear the underlying element of, why did you do that? Why did you think that was a good idea? There tends to be a negative judgment attaching to the way we use why in everyday language. So again, if you agree with me or buy into the view that coaching language is important, why is often a question to avoid simply because of the underlying element of the way we perceive the question in the English language today. So some examples: what's the issue? What makes it an issue now? Who owns this issue or this problem? Great question. How much commitment do you have for a solution on a scale of 1 to 10? What's your responsibility for what's been happening? Another great question. You're sitting down with somebody, they've come to you with a problem or a challenge. They may not be seeing, to the extent that you are, their own responsibility in delivering the outcomes that they are currently getting. And remember, we talked earlier on, one of the things you're trying to do is help somebody raise their own self-awareness and recognize themselves, what's happening in the process. So that's a fabulous question to be able to say, what do you think your responsibility is for what's been happening? And another great question right below it, what are the implications of doing nothing? And again, just helping people to understand, well, more than likely, if we do nothing, things will stay the same, and that probably isn't an ideal outcome. But you can see how you're trying to nudge people forward in terms of their own thinking, not to a particular direction that you believe they should be taking, but hopefully to a direction that they recognize themselves makes sense for how they move forward. And this is, of course, where the feedback piece can kick in as well, where we are offering feedback to somebody. And I've put up in the top, feedback is a gift with the exclamation mark. So it's meant to be slightly jocular because, again, we've somewhat hijacked the use of the word feedback in everyday English, and it tends to have a negative connotation. I mean, how often, if somebody approaches you at your desk and say, would you step into my office, I want to give you some feedback, do we think that's going to be a positive experience? I'd suggest not very. But of course, in a coaching environment, good coaches are good in the art of feedback, and they focus on the things that can be changed. The feedback is contemporaneous with what they're seeing. In other words, that's part of the ongoing conversation process I spoke about earlier. I'm giving you feedback as I see the action going on, not 3 months later at your quarterly review or at your half-yearly review. In other words, it's happening in the moment. And by the way, of course, that can be really positive feedback about something you've seen somebody doing. And there's a general acceptance that people are more open to buying into or accepting feedback if it's coming at them from a coaching perspective. And of course, there's very often, as we all know, a discrepancy between how we see ourselves and how everybody else sees us. And coaching can help close down that gap. I think it's probably a truism to say, for most of us, that's a general outcome. It's very, very hard to see yourself the way the rest of the world sees you. But coaching can support us to see ourselves perhaps a little bit more objectively than we might otherwise do. Okay, I'm going to wrap up looking at the GROW model. Now, John Whitmore, who I mentioned at the outset, and I think I said to you, really started this whole concept of what we see today as modern day coaching as far back as the late 70s. He died in 2017, aged 80, but he left behind a significant body of work in the coaching space, and is really identified as somebody who's been very central in the way we think about coaching in today's world. So let me just, again, I'm just having a few problems with the video, so just bear with me. What I want to do here is just walk you through his GROW model. And GROW stands for goal, reality, options, and will. And let me just quickly take you through that. And this can be used, by the way, as a structure for people who may be inexperienced in coaching. They want to try their hand I'm not saying it's something that you should slavishly stick to, but it is one model that can often help people to try and get started when they need a bit of structure in the conversation. And very simply, what do you want to achieve under the goal heading? Where are you now? What's the current reality or the current status? What options are open to you? And what will you do? And if I go back to the reality, when somebody tells you where they're at now, their thinking may need to be challenged. That's where some of the challenge may come in. And equally, again, when you get to what will you do, and the coachee is undertaking to do something, that needs to be recognized as their commitment to themselves. It's not a commitment to you as the coach. It's a commitment to themselves about what they're going to do next. And this second slide on the GROW model just goes into a little bit more detail in breaking down what's involved in each of the quadrants within the circle. So agreeing the topic for discussion, setting short-term aims under goal, the reality of inviting self-assessment, avoid or checking assumptions. You can see how these are important elements of trying to really get under the current status and have somebody think about what's going on. Making sure that we've covered out the range of options that might be open and we're not discarding things that perhaps need to be left in. And of course, what will I commit to doing? What will I take on? And what support, perhaps as a coachee, do I need from you as the coach to help me move on in the process? And finally, I want to say to you, coaching, it's not about you. The conversation is never about you. It's always about the coachee. Ideally, coaching needs to be future focused. Of course, we need to understand what's given rise to the conversation taking place in the first place. And what is it that we are challenged with that we may be trying to fix or maybe trying to find a solution to. And that means that we need to perhaps look at what's been happening up to now. But the conversation and the energy and the effort needs to go into how do we go forward rather than dwelling on the past. And I think it's important to say, and just to remind ourselves that we shouldn't underestimate the power and the impact of affording another human being your undivided attention. Not just to listen to them, but to really, really hear them. And I think as a coach, be authentic, be yourself. Don't put yourself under pressure. Your role is to support and challenge. And you can do that by being authentic and by being yourself. You don't have to get everything right. But you do at some point have to decide you're going to jump off the cliff and have a go at this. Try and put yourself into the role of coach in an authentic way for the benefit of your team. And finally, I would say to you that coaching is a relationship of equals, and we should always recognize that. I don't think authority should go into the room with you in a coaching conversation, irrespective of you being the team leader, the team manager, the supervisor. When we sit down in that room together, we are having a coaching conversation which forms part of a relationship of equals. Right, many thanks for sitting through that. I hope you found it useful. I'm going to pass back to Claire because I'm sure some questions may have come in. And I'm going to hand over to Claire and find out where we're at on that and see can we answer them for you.
Great. That's lovely. Thanks very much, Gerry. So if you can hear me, we've had some questions in. Some people obviously need to hop off for lunch, but anyone that can stay, please do stay. So Gerry, we had a question in from Katie who said that coaching or coach and leader are used interchangeably very often. Do a successful coach and a successful leader have the same core competencies?
It's a
easy question first.
yeah, it's a great question. And my sense is the answer would be yes. I think great leaders will bring to their leadership approach and style a coaching capability that makes them the great leader that they are. So the things that we've talked about already in this webinar, Claire, their ability to listen, their ability to engage in a way that allows them to set aside their own preconceived notions and indeed their own bias.
Yeah.
Their ability to lead by example because they are themselves coaching the people around them and helping the people around them to become better at the function that they have through the coaching that they are providing. So in my personal experience, if I look back at the people in my career that I would really admire and who were a significant impact on me, all of them and I'm not saying there was loads and loads, but those that I'm thinking of were natural coaches or made themselves very good coaches as part of their good leadership style.
And just following on from that, Siobhan has just come in with a question saying, how do you indicate that you're in a leadership mode or in a coach mode? Do you put a different hat on? Do you say, now I am talking to you as a coach, now I'm talking to you as a leader? I don't know how that would affect the conversation.
Yeah, I don't think we probably do it in quite that way, Claire. And this is again another good question. I think if you're looking to start down the coaching road, there's a couple of things worth considering, including, for instance, you may decide as the leader of the team to advise the team that going forward you want to adopt a more coaching approach or a more coaching style with them in the way that you're going to engage. But I'd be careful about overplaying that. And I'd be careful about giving a hostage to fortune. Another possible approach on this is that you don't necessarily communicate anything or announce anything. You simply, over a period of time, start to engage in more regular conversations that have a coaching approach to it. And you let people actually see that happening and react to it accordingly without having pre-flagged it. I think there's a couple of ways of going at this. And these are the type of things, of course, that we go into in more detail on the 2-day program.
Great. And then also related to that, Owen has come in with a question. It sounds like he's been doing the coaching, leading training at in his workplace. He said, have you ever gotten a learner or coachee who says, I know this area, I don't need coaching? What are you there for?
Yeah, yes is the answer. By the way, there are also periods where people are not capable of being coached. Different things may be happening, or they just may not be capable of being coached, full stop. So that's why I said at the very last slide, don't take too much responsibility onto your own shoulders. This is a bilateral approach. You can't coach me if I don't want to be coached, and that's not your responsibility. So in my experience, most people will probably be quite happy to try and engage with the process if they understand it's designed to support them and it's designed to be well-intentioned from their perspective. So I think that's the way to go into it. But if you do find somebody who's very anti the process and very anti the approach, you may decide that now is not an appropriate time to try to engage with them from a coaching perspective.
Okay. And then somebody has put in a question, can resilience support be incorporated into coaching? And something I'm just going to lob in is, if your organization hasn't already brought in a coaching style as part of their overall management style linked with resilience, how can you be a coaching leader, be resilient as a coaching leader, and if you're the only one in the organization doing it, the lone soldier?
That is undoubtedly difficult. Now, I did say earlier on, if the organization is committing to coaching as part of the organizational culture, that's really good news, because presumably then, if we go back to the slide we mentioned, the organization is putting in place the foundation to allow that to happen. And if you are a manager or a leader within that organization, you are presumably being supported to develop your own coaching approach. That's good news. If you're on your own, what I did say there was, you do need to be resilient. Yes, I think is the answer to the question straight away. And I think developing and building resilience within the team is a great thing to do anyway, from a coaching perspective, and indeed for ourselves. But again, don't take too much responsibility on yourself. Don't make yourself feel that if you're the only person trying to do it, that you're responsible for it then disseminating across the rest of the organization. Stay focused within your own team, stay committed, stay authentic, and make the effort. And I think people will appreciate that.
Great. And then just one last one before we finish up. They say that, the most precious gift we can offer to anyone is our attention. So listening is key. In the age of distraction, what advice can you give people?
Well, in the age of distraction, yeah, the first piece of advice I'm going to give is the extremely obvious one. Leave the mobile phone outside the room.
Okay.
I think being prepared to be present, Claire, is the starting point. So you've allocated whatever amount of time you've allocated. Don't let it get interrupted. Don't get distracted yourself. Stay focused on the individual in front of you. And that means being present. It means staying tuned into what's coming at you and really listening deeply for what's going on. And we do, one of the skill sets we do within the 2 days is the whole area of listening and how do I become a better listener. Another thing that's interesting is when we're in conversations with people, a lot of research has been done to show that when we stop talking, what are we waiting to do? Well, lo and behold, talk again is the answer to that question. When you're in a coaching conversation, you've got to stop yourself waiting to talk again because you've got to stay focused on what's coming at you. And what's coming at you, like really good broadcast interviews, should be what determines the next question, not the list of 10 that you had on the sheet on the way in.
Okay. So speaking of the course that we have coming up for coaching for skills, coaching skills for leadership, because that's exactly where we're at in this conversation. On the 27th and 28th of March, thanks very much there, Gerry, we have our next session in classroom. And today's session was just a bit of a teaser, a bit of an insight into what it is that you could develop in your own skill set, how you can help to develop your team, your organization through the benefit of those that skills development. And like Gerry was saying earlier on, every day is a school day when it comes to cognitive development, and every day is a school day, full stop. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for a couple of school days on March 27th and 28th. And as a token of our appreciation, you'll get a discount to attendees of this webinar. It's well worth the effort, it's well worth the time, and it's one of those things I would say that you can see from what Gerry was saying earlier, that the benefits are visible in a very short space of time, you know, to build your team awareness and your resilience and your you know, kind of just the ability to work together better to achieve what it is that your company needs. And then on the next slide there, Gerry, if you don't mind, our next Power Hour session is on power to communicate. Very much part of what it is that you do when you're coaching, listening, talking, you know, being able to communicate effectively with your team up and down the chain is essential. Being authentic and keeping it empathetic is another thing that we were talking about today as well, because empathy in a time of crisis is really hard to have. Sometimes it's hard to have empathy at the easiest times, but especially when things are hectic in work, it's a skill that if you've developed it, it's a muscle memory, and then it's something that you can put into action. So join us for that. And I think that's it. So Gerry, I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your insights. Your knowledge expands far beyond the 45 minutes that we heard from you today, but we're very glad to have that. We're hoping that it brings some people into the conversation directly with us, but it's always appreciated, everything that you do for us and that you do to develop managers and their leadership skills is very much appreciated.
Thanks, Claire, and thanks for everybody who took the time out on I'm sure on a busy day and probably gave up their lunch hour or the best part of it to join us. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you if it works for you, joining us later this month or indeed later in the year when we have some of the other programs happening. Thanks a million, Claire.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Gerry. Thanks everyone. Take care. Have a good rest of the day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.